Welcome to CurveBall DFI-ed. I'm your host, David Iofi, and on our 10th podcast, we have the pleasure of having Monica Rojas. Monica got a degree in international business at Palm Beach University and master's in entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial studies at Lynn University. Throughout her years in college and years following, Monica worked in different fields and was able to network with numerous companies. In today's podcast, we will learn how Monica became the head of community at Upstream, the coolest Web3 company. So currently right now, you're working at Upstream, and obviously it's really fun and exciting. But to get where you're at, you had to work really hard out of college, trying different things. Can you talk a little bit more about your background and how that ultimately shaped the person that you are?
Yeah, well, first off, thank you guys for having me. I'm really excited. You've been such an awesome community member, so I really appreciate everything you've done, for Upstream and for myself. I definitely think, my experience as an athlete growing up definitely has allowed me to really thrive in the community space, the team building space, and the relationship space. So I grew up playing soccer. I was a center midfielder for one of the best teams in Florida, and eventually I got a scholarship to play soccer at the Palm Beach Atlantic University and Lynn University for my master's. And funny enough, I wasn't the best player when I first started. So even like freshman year of high school, I barely even made varsity, right? I think I made varsity, or I didn't even make varsity till my sophomore year of high school. And I was actually the only one on my travel team to not make varsity. So that was really a reality check for me. And it allowed me to like really challenge myself because I personally wanted to quit. Because if you don't make varsity, you're the only one on your your premier travel team that's not on varsity. It's like as a 13, 14-year-old, like that's really, I would say, challenging. And it's hard to really kind of overcome that. My parents were like, no, you're not quitting soccer. We're going to get you a trainer, this and that. So over the next few years, I started working really hard. And then eventually I made varsity. I eventually became the starter for both my club team and my school team. And my school team was actually the best art team in the district for 21 years in a row. So it was a really good team as well. And eventually I became MVP of my high school team. And I was second team all county, which means like you're not on the first team all county yet, but you're almost there. And by the time I was a senior in high school, I became captain of the team and I became MVP for the second year in a row. And then I also got invited to the county all-star game. And then I became MVP of the all-star game, right? So let me remind you, I was literally the only person on my travel team to not make varsity. And I literally sat on the bench, played 5 minutes. And 4 years later, I was MVP at the All-Star game. I was the only one on my team to get awarded that. So I would devote my success to hard work and nothing but hard work because I'm 5'2" and it's definitely not my height. So I would outwork my team. I would show up super early to the gym before school, soccer after practice, and I was definitely a fighter, right? So I learned how to fight and also be really good at one thing. So on the soccer field, I was known for my passing skills. I was a center midfielder. I wasn't the fastest. Again, I wasn't the tallest, but I was really good at one thing. So kind of just to summarize why I just shared like my whole life story, my high school soccer story with you guys is because that's what allowed me to transition into the role I am today, which is head of community. You work hard, you show up, you're consistent, and you also identify what your strengths are and be the best at that. And that's how you become MVP. And that's kind of how I got to head of community at Upstream.
Yeah, definitely coming from an athletic background myself, I didn't play junior varsity. I only played varsity, but for a completely different reason than you. I wasn't good enough for junior varsity my freshman year and sophomore year of high school. I played basketball and I kind of had that same mindset where it's like, I'm not going to give up. I'm going to keep working. My family kind of did wish that I stopped working as hard and kind of focused on the educational side. But I never wanted to give up on my dream and prove to everybody that was like, hey, you're not going to make it, that I could actually make it. So that's ultimately why I decided. And then I put in all that work And then finally, when I got in and I was able to accomplish it and made varsity, it felt so much better. So definitely once you made that all-star game, I could only imagine what that felt like. Because you're like, looking back, you're like, oh, I would have never thought that this would happen. You spoke a little bit about how your athletic side kind of helps you with where you're at right now. What importance does education have on your career trajectory?
So it's funny because as a high school student, I really focused on athletics and not as much on education. However, I mean, I knew I had to get good grades to go to a school, because even if you're like the best soccer player, if you don't have good grades, you have to really focus on at least a little bit on academics. So I would at least be an A and B student. However, if it, like, my dad would always tell me, like, soccer is a gateway to education. So when I was in college, I really focused on building relationships with my teachers, because again, I wasn't the best student in class. However, I would say I was a favorite student in class because I would fake laugh at all my teachers' jokes. And also I would just ask questions, participate, engage, go into the office and ask questions that I really didn't know what I was asking, but they showed that I was trying. So just doing all those little things has really allowed me to excel in the education side. And it's funny because the only time a teacher told me, said to the class, "Hey, Monica, you're the only one that can't answer this question," was when I was 22 years old in my master's. And they asked, or it was a class, creativity and innovation. So that was the only time I was like really good at school. And my teacher's like, "Everyone in this class can answer this question except for Monica." And I'm just like, I never thought this day would finally come. So with that being said, you don't have to be really good again in every subject area, but eventually, like, you have to be the best at like one class, and then also like embrace your creativity and innovation, embrace your math skills, embrace your, creative writing, because at the end of the day, it's like you're not going to do a career in everything. You're going to do a career most likely in one thing, unless you're an entrepreneur. Then you do have you do have to dabble, but not like be an expert in all,
Yeah. Definitely quite funny that you did mention about how you weren't the best student, but definitely your teachers did like you. Levy and myself were in the same school and have known each other since fourth grade. And we went to the same high school, elementary school, middle school. And definitely I was not the strongest student in any of our classes. And I was probably one of the worst students in my civil engineering class in high school. But I was definitely my professor's, my teacher's, one of his favorite students. And he told me, he's like, "David, I don't know if you're going to become an engineer, but I know you will be my most successful student." And that always resonated with me. And I always reach out to Mr. Bullis, and shout out to Mr. Bullis. And I always tell him, like, I never forgot what you said, and I always keep going with it. And he kind of saw it as like, how you did say that it's very important to build those relationships with your teachers, because that is those relationships are ultimately what's going to help you. There's no like aptitude test when you're applying for a job. It's like how good you are in front of people and getting what you think is right, getting that, like figuring out what the right decision is and implementing that into the actual workplace. And I think that that's ultimately how people develop the positions that they're in, because when you're applying for a job, you have like all of these roles, but when you actually do get into the job, sometimes it like mixes a little bit and you have to kind of create your own position. And definitely as head of community, your job definitely changes day to day. Can you talk a little bit more about how you realized that head of community is something that you're interested in and how you knew you could do it?
Yeah. So before I was head of community at Upstream, I did have experience in the entrepreneurial space. I actually started a business in college. And then I was helping build South Florida's tech and startup scene. So naturally, before like community managers were really like a public facing role, or even just like nowadays you see, community roles pop up everywhere. But before, even just 2 years ago, you didn't really see it as much. I was doing a lot of community stuff, right? I was hosting events. I was running 8 peer groups, which are literally groups for subject matter experts, and sending meeting notes, creating the virtual events, engaging, finding speakers for them, doing all of that. I was hosting huge committees in South Florida to empower the startup scene. So we would invite all the startup accelerators, incubators, and not investors, but like more like mission-driven companies into like weekly or monthly meetings. So I was doing a lot of like activations naturally. And eventually Upstream moved to Miami when Alex, our CEO, moved to Miami. And, they started hosting these big happy hours. My friend Jadon started working there. And eventually I started like kind of understanding what Upstream was doing. And eventually they were looking for a community manager, and they reached out to me like, hey, we think you'd be perfect for the role. I'm like, well, tell me more about the role. And they're like, hey, this is this and that. And I'm just like, that's exactly what I'm doing right now for Tech Hub, my old company. So I eventually got brought in as a community manager. And for me as a community manager, my goal was really to just like listen, right? So especially when you're new to a company, you're joining a team, make sure you're kind of understanding the pain points of each different department that is in your company, but also understanding the pain points of your biggest and most loyal customers. And that's what I started doing. And eventually I started figuring out what events people liked, what was everyone's favorite features, how it could be like connecting people naturally, what I like, just doing a lot of stuff that was low energy and high impact, especially when you run a community that's like 15,000 people. It's hard to do that for everybody. And eventually I was brought into the role head of community, where I personally, like, I love my job just because I try to be very empathetic with my members and like always remind myself, okay, what would I want someone to do for me if I was a founder or if I was an investor or if I was a student, right? So that's kind of what separates me from most people, I would say, is just like, going that extra mile, even though I might not have the time for it. Like, I'm going to make a point to go the extra mile at least once a week.
Yeah. I mean, my whole journey of Team DFI and figuring out my whole entrepreneurial journey did start with Upstream. And definitely in the early days, I definitely utilized the office hours feature. And I spoke to you quite a bit, spoke to Alex and the whole Upstream team. And kind of, I dabbled here and there, kind of asked questions. You were able to help me connect with certain people. I went to a lot of Upstream events, spoke to a lot of cool people. And definitely, I think that you're doing a great job at Upstream. The community is very involved. I think that the way that the app is developing, and even now that you guys raised that Series A, which is definitely very cool and exciting, I think you guys are definitely going towards the right direction. But I want to kind of touch back a little bit. And you did mention that you grew up in South Florida. You spent like a lot of time in South Florida. How has that affected your career choice?
Yes, that's a really good question. I feel like I've been spoiled living in South Florida. So I've always, growing up in South Florida is a super diverse place, right? Where I'm used to meeting people from all over the world, talking different languages, like really embracing the culture. But also like now that Miami is a really big tech scene, I was able to experience it before it was kind of like the hot new thing in the US. So, working in South Florida has definitely allowed me to always grow up just like respecting everybody's different cultures, and also finding ways to engage different people from all over the world. Like I'm not saying that certain cities in America are like the same people, but I'm saying is like in Miami you really have to have patience when you're dealing with different languages, different beliefs. You're dealing with different ways of thinking, ways of working. So that's definitely been a way for me to experience just empathy and allow it to transition into my work life.
Yeah, I mean, definitely coming from New York City, I understand what you're talking about, being with around different people and working together and kind of seeing this whole thing so that you're not as shocked. And definitely things happen in New York faster than they happen in other places. But I think that Miami right now, because of all like the tax incentives and just the nicer weather, and people are all at home right now because of COVID, then kind of everybody kind of shifted to Miami. Can you talk a little bit about how that has affected Upstream as a company with this whole change of relocation from initially from New York to Florida?
Yeah, so I wasn't around when Upstream was in New York, but from my understanding, I have noticed that more everyone who moves from New York to like South Florida, they always use Upstream as kind of like an entry point. So I've been really trying to find out ways on how I can help, people moving down from New York. Like if I was moving down to a new city, like, is it like, would I want a welcome buddy? Would I want just like a warm face at an existing event? So figuring out what we could do to make the move a little bit easier. And I'm not saying like a lot easier because it's really hard to like make a move easier, but at least like, oh, hey, Upstream made my day by connecting me to this person. Or if it wasn't for Upstream's office hours, I wouldn't have met that person, so for us, the transition to Miami has actually helped us a lot. Even though we do want to get more involved in New York City, but that could be another topic.
Yeah, I mean, you guys definitely still host a lot of in-person events in New York City, and very fortunate that I get to go to them and meet a bunch of cool people. But you did mention about how you guys have thousands of people on your platform, building this whole community aspect. How do you prepare before hosting an event, knowing that there's a possibility of hundreds of people showing up?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. Even like in South by Southwest, we always make sure to have like a photographer. That way we can capture like the really awesome moments. We make sure to have a check-in system. That way we kind of keep track of who's coming in. And then this last time we've had a POAP. So we had a proof of attendance protocol badge. Basically, it's like a virtual badge when you go to events. So just doing the small things really well, and then like I feel like Upstream naturally like attracts really awesome people. So that's never really been my problem, but just like making sure that everything's presentable, that our branding's in place. Are we going to have slides? If we're going to have slides, we're going to have the best slides anyone has seen at any event, right? Are we going to have a banner? If we're going to have a banner, it's going to be like talking about DAOs because that's our new purpose, right? Are we going to have like t-shirts or hats? Okay, so let's set it up over here. That way people aren't just like piled up by the door. So just doing the small things really well, and then sending a really good follow-up is kind of like my secret sauce. Whether it's like, hey, David, it was great to see you in Miami, although you're in New York, or like, this is our favorite picture, or just like, what's next? Doing that stuff and like really prepping is helpful.
Yeah. I think one thing that you guys are underselling is that I think Upstream has really good like merch, and even Alex, how you guys created this whole NFT project where if you purchase the shirt, you guys would also get the shirt as an NFT. I think that your merch is also pretty cool about like the just DAO it. So definitely your creativity. I think you guys are a little bit underselling it, but it's really nice. So right now, obviously Web3 is like the sexiest thing in the place. Can you talk a little bit more about where Upstream plays in this whole Web3 community and how you think that the Upstream Collective is going to help a user domain grow?
Yeah, so it's definitely been a journey, and that's actually a really good question because I get this all the time, right? It's like, because it's different when you're a Web2 individual that's curious about Web3, but it's completely different when you're a Web2 company with 15,000 and plus users transitioning into Web3, right? So what we have to think about is how are we going to educate and empower our users and share the opportunities with them of Web3? Because if they're winning, we're winning, right? So we've been really focused on figuring out ways to like educate. So we've changed our strategy a little bit. We're focusing all our Upstream early birds, which is our main community on Upstream, to Web3 events. But we're really trying to be the go-to DAO platform. There hasn't been one that's kind of been like leading the charge yet. There's a few competitors, but also like our competitive advantage is the fact that we like lead with community, right? Where it's like you can ask us honest conversations about DAOs. We're hosting events about DAOs. We're being transparent when we answer your questions. Or, right now, like a lot of people are reaching out to like start DAOs on Upstream, and we're like, honestly, you're just not ready. Like, this doesn't make sense. Like, stay as a company, right? So like, I feel like being genuine and also like just helping our community is what is going to allow like our DAO platform to really grow. But also like, I don't know if you've like looked through our collectives, but just the simplicity of it, like now, so you're telling me I don't have to worry about the tech stack and I could really just focus on building my community on a platform? Like that's definitely the like the easiest thing you can do, right? Because like people don't realize where, yeah, you can talk about the tech, you can do this, but when you're not when you're not like actually growing your community and being and communicating and sharing the roadmap, you're probably not going to have any DAO members. So it doesn't really matter what tech you use, you know?
Yeah, I think that another good thing that Upstream does is how you guys have those NFT events on Friday. Definitely, myself, I didn't know that much about NFTs, and I did not have any NFTs before I joined Upstream. And definitely listening to Alex talk and just learning more about it. I actually won a raffle that Alex had, and when he started the raffle, the NFT was like worth like almost nothing. And then when I won the project, it was worth like zero point 0.4 ETH, and he was like, "Congratulations, you won!" But like it completely jumped, so I kind of feel bad myself giving it to you. But it was like one of those things where I was like, "Wow!" Like I actually see that this is like possible, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I've definitely been having like a good time with Upstream. I'm going to a lot of events. As you did mention, you do have competition. What makes Upstream different than some of the other Web3 development companies?
Yeah, so that's actually, I kind of mentioned this in the last question, but what makes us different is our community.
Yeah.
And I would say just like, we're not like, we're really here to help. I feel like we've kind of created that brand where it's like even you, where it's like, you're like, oh, how can I help you, Monica? Like, what do you need? Part of the community, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, okay, like we've created that culture. So just leading with that. And also like, Alex has an established name in the community. So you do business with people that you trust. So we don't really try to sell Upstream at all. We really just try to hear like what people's pain points are and then leverage that, right? Or like, oh, this is your pain point. Well, what if we did this? Would this be attractive to you? Or like, hey, you know, we really like your community. We'd love to support it on Upstream, and this is what we could do for you, right? So like not being too pushy, but also like really caring about community is what allows us to separate from our competitors.
Yeah. Yeah. For those that don't know, Alex is the CEO of Upstream. Just for like our audience to kind of, if they are interested. So definitely it sounded like you love where you're currently at and you're learning significantly more here in the short period of time as compared to your previous roles. Can you talk a little bit more about what you wish you knew now as opposed to like the start at the beginning of your career?
Yeah. So are you referring to about like just Web3 in
Yes.
general, or
No, I'm
like
talking about like the whole like startup journey,
mm,
because definitely there's different industries that you worked in and different roles that you had, and now you're currently where you're at right now, and you seem to be enjoying it a lot more. So,
yeah.
what do you wish you knew before you started going on this journey?
Yeah. So I wish I knew how to better prepare my personal skill sets, right? So for example, even if I was in marketing or business development or even you know, just operations, like what best practices can I start integrating? What habits can I start integrating that will allow me to be successful in anything I do? So by that, it's like, okay, like let's talk about our morning routine real quick. Like, do I have the 6 tasks that I want to accomplish that day? Whether it's like if I'm still in school, whether it's like making a smoothie, going to the gym, you know, writing a thank you note to my teacher, like practicing just like being really intentional and also like on top of things and just organized is definitely something I wish I would have done better when I was younger. Just because now I'm like, okay, I have so much on my plate where if I'm not organized, if I don't have things on my calendar, I don't have the bandwidth in my mind to remember things. So just like learning how to do that really well at a younger age. That way it's like, oh, this is easy, you know, like it's not, the transition won't be as much. Um, Also just being a really good listener before you start talking. A lot of times when you're younger, you just kind of want to like share what you know, or even just like jump to the conclusion and take things personal. Like, no, really understand why people are saying certain things, or don't don't take things too personally, especially like, you know, when you're young, you just don't know things. Like when I don't when someone's young or new to the team, we can't get mad if they don't know or they do it wrong because they've never done it before, right? So a lot of times when you're young, you're kind of hard on yourself when you don't know something, or if you screw up an interview, you can't, like, that's part of your story. You know what I'm saying? Like, eventually, you know, when you're a founder of a unicorn, you're gonna laugh about it. You're like, hey, like, you know, you really screwed up. You didn't like me in the interview. I screwed up the interview, and now look at me. So just taking those experiences and not thinking it's the end of the world is definitely helpful. Um, but also it's just like finding a mentor that holds you accountable, right? So I used to have a lot of mentors when I had my startup because I was part of an accelerator program. And I felt like it was more of like a casual mentorship, right? But like if you really find someone that you want to be like in 5 years or 7 years or even 20 years, doesn't matter. Like just really try to like see what they're doing and ask them really detailed questions. That way you can have like a notebook and look back at it, you know? So those are just a few things that came to my mind.
Yeah. So you did mention about when you are looking for a mentor and how that could help you with your career. And you did mention how like you look for where the person's at right now and kind of following their every step. But building that relationship with the mentor is really hard.
Yeah.
How do you use like networking to get into the situations where you are able to be like, hey,
Mhm.
can you be my mentor?
Yeah. So first off is showing up, right? So, and to give you a quick story, my dad was on a plane one time and he met like a big keynote speaker who's sitting next to him, and they started talking. And my dad's like, hey, my daughter's doing her master's. She would love to like chat with you. So I messaged him on LinkedIn. He's like, hey, I'm having a TEDx pre-party. Do you want to come? I'm like, well, I have soccer practice and it's an hour away. I can't really miss soccer. He's like, well, you might not get this opportunity again. So I literally told my coach, I'm like, all right, I know I have soccer practice. I'm like, you can't really miss soccer in college. Like it's your job. It's paying for my education, right? So I was like, look, I know this is a situation, but I'm happy to come practice twice one day, but I really can't miss this. I got invited to a TEDx pre-party. Like this is huge. So I showed up, and then he actually offered me an internship because I showed up. So just being there and showing that you're determined and you're serious about it, serious about learning, that's huge. But also like be a really good student where it's like whatever you need, like, hey, like how can I help you? Like these are my skill sets. This is what I want to like deliver or practice. Like how can I like please like I want like really take advantage of being young and dumb. That's it. Like take advantage of not knowing things and then be like, I want to be like you, right? Because like if someone came up to me like and said that to me right now, I'd be like, all right, come on. Like you're an intern for Upstream. I'll mentor you. I'll make sure to walk you through stuff because you appreciate that and you know that they're going to be somebody someday. Because imagine if everybody felt like that, then there wouldn't be special people, you know?
Yeah, 100%. Myself, I mean, I'm 20 years old. I'm not going to say I'm like super young, but I'm definitely a lot younger than people that are pursuing the path that I'm pursuing. So when I do tend to talk to people that have been in the industry, they're like, wow, like you're really like motivating. I wish I started when I was your age. I'm really like proud to like have you as like a connection. I can't wait to see where you do come. And they're kind of like cheering me on to keep going. And that's how we've been able at Team DFI to kind of keep going because we have a lot of cool people that believe in us, our message, and what we are doing. One of the things that I did realize working with a lot of early stage startups is that there isn't a huge female presence. And in the years that are coming, hopefully there will be a large shift because the industry is changing. Why do you think that there is that huge gap?
Yeah, so it starts with imposter syndrome, right? Where a lot of times, you know, as a female in the entrepreneurial space, it's not that you're told you can't do it because you can't really say that. But like even in conversation, I literally notice people will not make eye contact with me if I'm in a room full of guys, right? Or in a conversation full of guys. And I mean, people don't do it on purpose, but you pick up on that naturally. Um, you know, you're not really like prioritized. You feel like you're not really prioritized sometimes, or even like, hey, you have to do more of this thing, or you're not really you're never really empowered, right? Because even in school, in high school, you don't really learn how can I be the best version of myself? How do you, like, we don't do, there's no class, there's no empowerment class, right? So you have to teach yourself how to do that, which is really hard already as like a female, especially in a male dominated industry. But just figuring out ways to like know your skill set, and that gives you confidence. And then also like having daily affirmations like I am strong, I am kind, I am determined, I'm worthy, I create impact everywhere I go, and start believing in that, because at the end of the day it's like you what you think of yourself, people will see that, right? So if you know that you're a queen, then 100% everyone around you will know you're a queen, right? But it takes years of practice. You don't just wake up and like, I'm a queen.
Yeah.
You literally have to like do things to make you actually a queen, right? So that's it's a little bit difficult being a female in the space for sure, but things are changing, and there's a bunch of women-led communities and women founders that are really making it, like paving the way, making it a lot easier for women to just flow and like create great things in the room. So
Yeah. Even like a couple years ago, I think that people used to look at the younger generation completely differently. They would be like, oh, they don't know much. They're just younger, they need more experience. But now I feel like the older generation is starting to accept that the younger generation knows how to do social media marketing better. They know how to do like certain NFT projects better. Like even like all the whole like Web3 world, younger people are better at it than older people. So kind of, I think that there's a huge shift in the industry, and hopefully the next shift will be like more powerful women bosses.
100%.
Because even if you look at like the top like 100 bosses there, like of publicly traded companies, there's only a couple of women there, and definitely in the next coming years, hopefully that will be changed. We do on our previous podcast, we had the founder of One Village, Ashley Assign. So she was one of the most motivating founders that we've ever spoke with. She kind of told us her own story and how she's working right now relentlessly, and she kind of started off in the VC space and how she's like pursuing her dreams. And I think that's the most important thing, where it doesn't matter your age, your gender, like what your background is. All you have to do is just go out and try to achieve your goals. And I think that that's a mindset that every person should have no matter what. And when you do that, good things may happen. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about how your current, how your background has helped you with your current position? Like,
yeah, definitely. So again, if I wasn't an athlete growing up, I don't think I'd be where I am today and have my mentality. I'm a very passionate person with everything I do, and I always try to let everybody know that, like, hey, if I'm doing this because I love it, I'm not doing it because I have to. But also like, like I really believe in sports. Like it really changed my life, and I've told you, like, hard work, loving the process, all of that has allowed me to grow. But also like my family's from Colombia, so seeing my dad, he's in tech, he's an engineer for a unicorn company that's based out of Israel. Seeing how he went from being the poorest kid on the block and just not even pairs of shoes growing up, and my grandpa owning a mechanic shop in Jacksonville, Florida, and he moved to the US when he was 3, and how he's grown to become where he is in his career really inspired me. And even when I'm having hard times at work, I'm just like, if my dad can do it, I can do that. So that also allows me to be really empathetic when I see underrepresented communities, because I'm like, it reminds me a lot of my family, because all my family ended up, migrating to the US. And it's like, I'm gonna help this person. I'm gonna help these communities because somebody helped my dad. And I think I have enough leverage to do that, and it doesn't cost me a dime. So that's something why I'm really passionate in supporting different communities and being the voice for them and stepping up for them, and even just reminding them that they could do this and not to feel imposter syndrome is like super big. So sports is super big. And then also like, I don't know, I feel like I'm like a mixture of my mom and my dad. So my mom's just like super outgoing and bubbly, which I'm pretty outgoing. I'm not as bubbly as her. And my dad's just like super sarcastic. So I'm super sarcastic too. So like my backgrounds or my genes or whatever, like I've definitely created like this my own mix. And like once you get to know me a little bit more, David, you're able to see that I'm just like super goofy, but like that's definitely has shifted into like my personal brand in the community space where everyone knows, oh, Monica's, joking, or like she's someone you can talk to. We don't always have to talk about work. Like, just creating that feel of like, hey, like we're friends, like let's build together. I think that's definitely is what influenced my personal brand for sure.
100%. And I think that like I have like this, I could sense that you guys are all at Upstream like really good people, and definitely when you're a good person, good things do happen to you. And when you are passionate about what you're working on, you could get other people excited and kind of like out of their seats. You kind of spoke about how your parents were your idols and how you saw them do it, and you kind of saw yourself. Can you talk a little bit more about like another idol that you did have that wasn't your family when you were growing up?
Yeah, I definitely can. So I would say it's my grandpa. So I'm really close with my grandpa. He like, so I'm like his favorite player. And when I was younger, he'd come to my games. He'd drive down because we lived in like South Florida, which is like Miami, which is 5 hours away from where he lived. He would drive down and he would give me like $50 every time I scored a goal. He would carry my jug, and he's also very giving. So he always spoiled me. I'm his only granddaughter till this day. Like everyone, it's all grandsons. So he would always like go the extra mile, be really thoughtful. He got me my first puppy. He was the first one in my whole entire family to come to the US, just to literally live the American dream. He's hilarious. He's a good person, so it's just like he's always been my idol, and like everyone knows my grandpa's my best friend, and he's a huge soccer fan. When I used to go train in Colombia, I originally was going to play soccer in Colombia before I started working my full-time job, and he would go with me to practice and call coaches for me. So he's definitely my idol.
It was basically like your manager, and it's really important to have somebody in your life that could definitely see the light and kind of help you there, because guidance is something that some people do take for granted, but when you do have that person in your corner that's kind of guiding you and helping you, life does become a lot easier. What advice would you give to a person who has like a client-facing role, just like you do?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Let's get a little bit more focused on that question. A client-facing role, like community role? Is it more of like your own podcast? Like, where are we going here?
So when you have you do talk to a lot of people every single day, how do you prepare to do all that stuff mentally? Because it definitely is hard to be focused during all your meetings. How do you keep track of it and all that stuff? Like, it's just like the whole management side as well as the whole communicative side.
Oh, got it. Okay. So for me, I like to hear everyone's story, or at least like kind of understand who they are as a person, and then always find something that I can relate with them. That way it's like, okay, like, David and I have this in common, and I'm always going to remember that. Right. And I also try to remember people's asks. That way it's like, let's say if you're looking for more investors, let's say I'm an investor, I was talking to an investor, like, hey, I'm looking for more young entrepreneurs or young students. Perfect. Let me connect you with David. So just figuring out what everyone's needs are is really important for me. I could say that my follow-up game is weak and it needs improvement. So that's definitely something I need to like figure out if I want to just have an hour a day to do follow-ups, or just wait for the other person to follow up is not a good idea. And then also I try to do 15-minute meetings, just because if it's something that we really need to talk about, then, we can have a second meeting, but like it allows me to at least know, okay, what's our goal here? Especially in a community role where you're talking to a lot of people. I spend a lot of my time building community. So it's like a lot of strategy behind the scenes work, and you can only see so much. So I need to protect my personal space and energy, because talking to people is a little bit like not draining, but definitely requires my attention. And imagine being on for 8 hours straight. That's kind of like hard. So
I could definitely imagine that. Definitely when I started Team DFI, I didn't realize how straining it would be to be in meetings all day. Then through trial and error, I realized the max amount of meetings that I could hold a day is 5, because I also still do have school. And even now, 5 is seeming like a lot because I have 5 meetings. Then I also have like a podcast club. So it definitely becomes a little bit overwhelming, and you do tweak that system over time. Definitely working so much. How do you balance working as well as your personal life?
I'm still working on that, actually. So what I've been trying to do is remember that I'm Monica. I'm not Monica, head of community, which is really, really hard because everything I do is like revolves around community. So just figuring out ways where it's okay for me not to respond right away, right? I don't have to get to everyone's direct messages or emails, but then communicating like, hey guys, just so you know, I do get like 80 of these messages. Thank you for your patience. I really appreciate it. And that way people understand why it takes me long to respond. So that's it kind of helps me with my personal anxiety, where it's like, okay, at least they know I'm still human. And then figuring out like what can I do that's outside of tech and Web3 and community that I get to be really excited still. So that's playing soccer. And it's kind of like the best remedies for me because you're not on your phone, so doing things like that. But also like I am like what you see at work is what you'll see at home, at a party, on the soccer field. So I try to be the same person everywhere. So it's like I have to take energy from being like, okay, be serious at work, Monica. Okay, now be goofy. Okay, now like go dance. No, like I'll be the same person all around. And that kind of like allows me to just, protect my personal space from my workspace too,
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, I could imagine being head of community on the soccer field, you're like automatically assume the position of captain and nobody can really argue with that. You're like, I get paid for this. So I'm gonna take this position over. Definitely switching from job to job could be difficult. And then finally figuring out something that you do like could be challenging. And definitely there's a lot of ups and downs. Can you talk about like a down, like one of those at times when it was like a down for you and how you ultimately were able to get up out of there?
Yeah. So are you talking about like with my current job or just in
No,
general?
just in general.
Yeah. So one thing, it's like really important to remember it's not the end of the world, and it's really hard to like always remember that. And also like I like to do things that like when I'm really stressed out for work, I try to like organize, like write down everything I need to do, or like how much time it will take. And then that way it's like, okay, relax. Or also like what I really like to do is work on my vision board, and it allows me to get excited about what I have planned for the year. So for example, I like on my vision board, I found like a really cool Notion on a template on Notion. And then, now I have like my dream trip for the year is like Portugal. So then I get excited. I look for pictures of Portugal and like places to go and hotels to stay at, and kind of just like manifest it, right? Where it's like, okay, like I'm excited again. I'm calm. Nothing is really that important right now, although like my work is very time sensitive. Just figuring out like where I can find my calm spot, and then also like talking to your team about it. If your team is people you spend the most time with, even if it's virtually, if they're not going to be there for you in the times where you really need them, or at least understand, be like, or at least if you can't be honest with them, like, hey, look, I feel very overwhelmed. I have a lot on my shoulders. I didn't prioritize this at all. Can you give me a few days to fix this and get my stuff together? and we can like kind of move forward. And if they like get upset about it, then maybe that's not the workspace for you. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's kind of what, like, those are just some ways I cope with stress.
Yeah, thank you so much for giving us that feedback. We want to end off this podcast by kind of asking you your thoughts on certain topics, just like a quick run through. I want to know a little bit about what you would say about the setting that you're at, and what you think about that when it comes to networking.
Like the setting.
Yeah. So like if you're like at a bar, if you're like in an office, like at the beach, kind of what you think about now.
So I don't network at all. I build relationships. So I always try to find like people that I admire, or at least like I want to learn from, and then build relationships with them and figure out like, hey, what they like and what I like, and then make sure I follow up there. And for me, it's not really it's not like a numbers game, right? It's like obviously quality over quantity. Yeah, that's how I build relationships. I don't network.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more about the importance of structure?
Yeah, so I'm really big on morning routines, affirmations, like mapping out your world. So, for example, when you're structured, you're able to look forward to getting tasks done, right? Or like maybe pat yourself on the back when you actually get to do things like, wow, I did all of this. Because a lot of times you're always like, oh, I need to do so much more stuff. But if you have it organized, you can actually reflect and then be better the next week, and then also like see what you want to work on for the following week.
Yeah. Thank you again for coming on to CurveBall and sharing your story. It was a pleasure of having you on our podcast. And if you have any links that you'd like us to share with our audience, definitely they may be interested in learning more about Upstream and seeing you at some future events. So we'll definitely like to put that there. And is there anything that you're interested in finding out about our audience or people that are reaching out to you?
Yeah. If I could be helpful in any way, or at least like if there was something that you want me to get more detailed with, I'm happy to chat. It doesn't cost me a dime to provide feedback that will be life-changing for someone. So, do what you can for others. That's the biggest takeaway that I want to leave with.